Hello, my name is Father Matthew Kauth, and I will be your guide in this series on the nature of purgatory. It is a topic that is not often discussed any longer, and so we thought it appropriate to spend a bit more time on this particular topic just because it's not as well known. What is purgatory? Let's begin with just some basics. The word, of course, as you can no doubt already understand, has to do with some kind of a purging. Purgare in Latin is just a word for cleaning. So what needs to be cleaned? What we're going to see in this series are three basic concepts that sort of interpenetrate each other and evolve into this incredibly beautiful doctrine on purgatory. That which is, by the words of Saint Catherine of Genoa, the most merciful of doctrines. And the three elements that I want to look at specifically are the utter holiness of God, our real state, psychologically, personally, as sinners, and our mutual interdependence. Upon that rests all of our understanding of the nature of purgatory. But first, maybe we should just get rid of some of the common notions that we have of purgatory. And the first one, of course, that sort of sits in our minds is that when we die, someone puts on a little green visor and begins to count out the debits versus the credits. And you're sort of sweating it out at that moment, wondering if you're going to land on the positive side or the negative side, whether you're in the black or perhaps literally in the red. And ultimately, that's not what happens. And so purgatory is not a matter of all of a sudden I landed in the red, but not so far in the red that it's going to be a permanent red, but I get to pay my debts and I just sit there and pay. That doesn't take into account the reality of the human person, as we said before. And so I want to sort of rid ourselves of that particular notion. Also, I have heard it said by both priest and layperson that after death, I'm going to have a lot of burn time. So the burn time. We use these sort of images, and they're not wholly absent some truth, it seems. But at the same time, we want to look at the reality of purgatory in a very clear and objective fashion, as opposed to sort of the popular notions or even the popular piety that has surrounded the actual doctrine of purgatory. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, number 1030, paragraph 1030, defines this reality very simply. The Church states, all who have died in God's grace and friendship, but still imperfectly purified, are indeed assured of their salvation. But after death, they undergo a purification so as to achieve the holiness necessary to actually be able to enter into the joy of heaven. What a great definition. Talking about the state, as it were, of purgatory. But yet, not just a state, perhaps even a place, perhaps even a process. All of these things are sort of embedded into the notion of purgatory. We also want to avoid considering purgatory as basically just hell with an expiration date. Because hell is the absence of God, the absence of participation in Him, in His life, in communion. Whereas purgatory depends upon the presence of God for the very purging to take place. So we work out our salvation here in fear and trembling, but we also sort of work it out on the other side, mercifully so, if we die in the state of friendship with God. So with that in mind, I would like to continue by first discussing in the next lecture death itself. We should look at that reality square in the face. And then we talk a little bit about heaven and a little bit about hell. Because if we don't get these other realities of the four last things correct, then we're not going to understand the nature of purgatory itself. So join us next time as we begin by talking about death.